Welcome to the Farm Show on Westplex Talk 1045 for Saturday, March 7th, 2026. I'm your host, John Combest. You are listening to the penultimate, that's right, second to last edition of the Farm Show here on Westplex Talk 1045. I am choosing to put a period for now on this show. There are only so many hours in a week. Everyone can relate to that. We all get 24 hours in a day. We're all blessed with 24 hours in a day. As many of you know, along with along with station owner Brad Hildebrand, we do a show Monday through Friday right here on Westplex Talk 1045 called The Brad and John Show. And I will still be on The Brad and John Show, and you'll still be hearing some ag updates as they relate to our local area and the state of Missouri on The Brad and John Show. But this will be our second to last show of the Farm Show on this station. And next week, March 14th, 2026, will be the final edition of the show on this station. So, without any further ado, I'm not going to get all sentimental on you today. We'll save that for next week. Commentary from Governor Mike Kehoe on an important business here in our broadcast area. This story was brought to us by Kara Hart of the Brownfield Ag News. She posted it this week on March 5th. Kara's headline was, Kehoe says, beef processing growth strengthening Missouri cattle sector. And as we noted on the Brad and John Show this week, it's not every day that Missouri's governor highlights a business, an employer, right here in our broadcast area. I'll tell you what Kara had to say. Missouri's governor says expanding meat processing in the state is providing a boost to the state's cattle industry. Mike Kehoe spoke to an ag audience at the University of Missouri on Wednesday. The governor said, "We have the chicken and egg theory. We have a processor who wants fat cattle. And there are people who say they're not going to fatten cattle until we have a processor. That market is starting to work out." Kara writes, the American Foods Group in Warren County started processing cattle almost 1 year ago. And Kehoe says at full capacity, the plant will process around 2,500 head per day. The governor says, quote, now that we have a place that will take the fat cattle, we're starting to have Missouri cattle production facilities instead of just backgrounding actually fattening cattle. End of quote. Kara goes on to write, he says it's a win-win for other commodities because livestock feed is the largest demand driver for U.S. corn and soybeans. Kehoe says it could incentivize producers to retain cattle and eventually help in rebuilding the U.S. cattle herd. Again, that story is brought to us by Kara Hart from Brownfield Ag News, and you can find it by going to brownfieldagnews.com. And speaking of great journalism coming from mid-Missouri, another piece, this one from KOMU, they're based in Columbia, Missouri. Governor Kehoe speaks at Mizzou about the future of agriculture. This piece was brought to us by Campbell Kessler from KOMU. And Campbell reports, Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe spoke to students at University of Missouri Wednesday about the future of agriculture. Mizzou Collegiate Farm Bureau connects MU students with the Missouri Farm Bureau by hosting a forum each spring. And Kehoe spoke at this year's forum. Students from the College of Agriculture, Food, and Natural Resources were in attendance and could ask Kehoe questions on issues of the importance to Missouri agriculture. I think that's supposed to read issues of importance to Missouri agriculture, but I digress. Kehoe said, quote, agriculture is one of the things that saved me as a kid, end of quote. And the forum, we should note, was moderated by U.S. Farm Report host Tyne Morgan, who I will note is a graduate of the University of Missouri. The youngest of 6 kids, Kehoe is a first-generation farmer and bought his first farm by 19 and owned cattle by the time he was 21. Tyne Morgan says, agriculture is changing rapidly with technology, automation, and data. Tyne asked Kehoe how he thinks agricultural education from K-12 through universities, will need to evolve to prepare the next generation. Kehoe said, quote, technology is something that this younger generation is going to be way better at than old people like me. That is going to be the key to production, Kehoe said. Kehoe said he thinks that within the next 5 to 10 years, agricultural marketing is going to be the biggest job in demand. Students were able to ask Kehoe questions at the end of the forum. He left the students with one piece of advice. Quote, in agriculture, I really do believe our best innovators come from people who aren't afraid to try, who weren't afraid to fail, and weren't afraid to try again. You can see the video and read the content of that piece by going to komu.com. That's komu.com. Now, a third piece of great agricultural journalism has to do with an issue of importance to cattle farmers. This piece is brought to us by the Missouri Ruralist publication, and specifically reporter Elizabeth Hodges. Elizabeth wrote this week the headline, Emerging Cattle Disease Spreads to 60 Missouri counties. And this does affect both Franklin County and St. Louis County. We'll get to that in just one moment. Elizabeth writes, in August 2017, 7 cattle, ranging in age from 3 months to 13 years, died on a farm in Virginia after showing signs of weakness and lethargy. All were born and raised on the farm. A month later, another cow in the herd showed signs of weakness, jaundice, and severe anemia. Elizabeth quotes Craig Payne, University of Missouri Extension veterinarian here. Quote, the herd veterinarian examined the cow and made a preliminary diagnosis of anaplasmosis. However, blood samples were sent off to be tested for anaplasmosis. It came back negative, but the veterinary pathologist working on this case did a blood smear, stained the slide, looked at it under a microscope, and identified what they call pyroplasm on red blood cells. This led to further investigation, and it was eventually determined that Theileria orientalis ikeda, let's just call that TOI, was the cause of the disease. Since then, this disease has been reported in multiple states, including Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Iowa. I won't list them all, but let's just say it includes the state of Missouri and several others. TOI was first detected in Missouri in June 2023 and has since been reported in 60 counties. Now, here's where I'm going to pause and go to the Missouri Department of Agriculture's map, which shows that Theileria orientalis has been detected in Franklin County. And in St. Louis County, both Theileria orientalis and the Asian longhorn tick have been identified in St. Louis County. Okay, back to Elizabeth's piece. With the westward movement of this disease, it is critical to understand how it spreads and how to minimize the impact. So how does it spread? The Asian longhorn tick is the primary vector of TOI, and the tick transmits the organism through its saliva while feeding on cattle. Payne explained, the organism infects red blood cells, and those red blood cells are damaged and lost during circulation. This is going to create anemia, and there will also be an inflammatory response associated with the infection. It may also be transmitted from infected to uninfected animals through biting flies, sucking lice, and blood-contaminated equipment such as needles and tagging tools. Cattle typically show clinical signs of disease within 1 to 8 weeks of infection. The severity of symptoms varies among animals. Dr. Payne goes on to say, keep in mind that the severity of the anemia and the severity of the inflammation is going to dictate what those clinical signs look like. The reality is, many cattle are not going to show clinical signs, even though they're infected. Cattle infected with TOI may exhibit the following symptoms: anemia, depression, fever, reduced feed and water intake, pale mucous membranes, increased respiration, and late-term abortions. Payne goes on to say, There is a death loss risk associated with this disease, and normally it's reported to be between 1% and 5%. But I am aware of situations where the losses have been much higher. Unfortunately, it happens, but fortunately, not a lot. Elizabeth goes on to write, Kane added that the reason some cattle populations are more severely affected is unclear. However, stress can increase the severity of clinical signs. It is also important to note that any cattle infected with the organism will be infected for life. Payne says, once an animal is chronically infected, it will unlikely have problems with that disease from that point forward. How to protect your cattle. Elizabeth writes, there are no antibiotics available in the U.S. to treat teleosis, so options are limited. Payne recommended supportive care, which includes minimizing stress and handling, providing access to water and palatable feed, and administering anti-inflammatories if necessary. No vaccines are available to protect cattle from the disease. Control focuses on minimizing transmission, which decreases the level of exposure in a herd. This is accomplished by controlling insect vectors, such as Asian longhorn ticks and biting flies, changing needles between animals, and disinfecting blood-contaminated equipment. How you manage new additions to the herd also needs to be considered. Payne says, adding naive cattle to a herd where the disease is already present increases the risk of disease in those new additions. The inverse is true. Introducing infected cattle into a herd where the disease is not present places the resident population at risk. How new additions should be managed is a discussion that producers should have with their herd veterinarian. As the disease continues to spread westward, it is essential for producers to be aware of the clinical signs of disease and methods of control. Producers should work with their veterinarian to develop a plan that will minimize the impact of the disease. Now, Elizabeth goes on to write quite a bit more, but we're going to pause it there for now. If you want to read this piece, go to farmprogress.com and click on Missouri Ruralist, or look for a headline that says, Emerging Cattle Disease Spreads to 60 Missouri Counties. The summary, I guess we can say, is that folks in Franklin County and St. Louis County are already dealing with this disease, and it has yet to spread to Warren County and St. Charles County. And I wanted to save time before we go to break. Big news from Commodity Classic in San Antonio, Texas last week that could affect everyone. The USDA policy of one farmer, one file. I'm not going to ruin the news. I'm going to play it to you straight from USDA. Here's what Rod Bain and the folks at USDA had to say about one farmer, one file.
How to create greater efficiencies at USDA. Greater efficiencies for producers submitting forms for various Agriculture Department programs, and greater efficiencies for local USDA Service Center staff in processing these applications and improving data access and flow. An initiative to resolve these matters was recently introduced by the Agriculture Secretary.
I'm excited to announce officially the USDA's One Farmer, One File initiative, which creates a single, streamlined record that follows you, the farmer, no matter where you go in the USDA system.
I'm Rod Bain. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins and other senior USDA officials join us as we look at the One Farmer, One File initiative in this edition of Agriculture USA. When Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins recently announced the One Farmer, One File initiative before an audience at this year's Commodity Classic, she explained the goal for this effort.
Eliminate redundant information gathering, reduce friction in every producer interaction, retire outdated systems, and give farmers a single, seamless, secure experience at USDA. We will completely transform USDA's IT systems and change the way farmers interact with our department.
The background leading to the initiative includes years of outdated and in some cases antiquated IT systems at local USDA service centers that did not share information with each other, creating redundancies in the application filing process and slower response and payment times. And in the case of farmers filing acreage reporting for many USDA programs,
up until now, farmers had to drive to a county office, be handed a paper map, and then manually certify their acres every year.
In terms of what the One Farmer, One File initiative looks like on the ground level, the initial example comes from the recent start to the Farmer Bridge Assistance application period. As explained by Agriculture Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation Richard Fordyce,
we were actually asking folks to go to login.gov as the security front door to be able to access Farmer Bridge Assistance pre-filled forms.
The concept, with incorporation of login.gov, was both savings of time and money compared to mailing forms, and greater efficiencies. Among those trying out the login.gov access portal when FBA sign-up began, Natural Resources Conservation Service Chief and farmer Aubrey Betancourt.
The integration has been fantastic, and the turnaround time on it has been fantastic. My dad and mom and I sat there and signed it up with them. I think we were signed up through login.gov in 7 minutes or less, and we started seeing that One Farmer, One File play out right there in real time, and the turnaround time on payments, I firmly believe, because we started seeing payments from other programs clearing, and we know that FBA is right behind it.
Secretary Rollins adds, regarding the initial rollout of Farmer Bridge Assistance online application availability,
in just the past few days, we have seen 50 times more producers sign up online than ECAP did over its entire 5-month sign-up period last year.
The reference to last year's Emergency Commodity Assistance Program enrollment. She says Phase 2 of the One Farmer, One File initiative is scheduled for later this spring.
We will roll out an advanced acreage reporting platform that will allow farmers to file faster and easier and enable USDA to deliver programs and assistance with speed and precision. We are working with our FSA county offices right now to pilot geospatial acreage reporting, the backbone of FSA programs.
And as for the objectives of the initiative for the long term, specifically the next 2 years,
USDA will extend this modernization across the entire department.
More details about the One Farmer, One File initiative can be obtained through local USDA service centers or online at www.usda.gov. The Agriculture Secretary envisions the initiative and its components as a chapter in USDA customer service filled with
faster program delivery, faster signups, faster processing, stronger security.
Even with the efforts to streamline program applications, local service center IT systems and such, FPAC Undersecretary Richard Fordyce and others acknowledge some producers prefer in-person visits at the local office.
If you don't have a login.gov, if you're not comfortable with login.gov, you still have the opportunity to go to your county office. If you're still comfortable having that conversation over the counter at the local FSA office, that's still available to you as well.
This has been Agriculture USA. I'm Ron Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
When we come back in our second segment today, B Block, you will hear directly from a press conference of Brooke Rollins at Commodity Classic. You'll also hear from Missourian Richard Fordyce at that same press conference. You're listening to the penultimate edition of the Farm Show. We'll be right back.